Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jess Lenore in Baltimore. The nation is continuing to reel from the shooting at the gay Orlando nightclub on Sunday, left at least 49 dead, and is considered the worst mass shooting in recent U.S. history. The suspected attacker, Omar Mateen, reportedly pledged allegiance to ISIS in a call prior to the attacks. This prompted presumptive Republican nominee Donald Trump to double down on his plans to ban Muslims from entering the U.S. This is a clip of his interview with Fox News.
We can't have it in our country, Brian. Something's going on, whether it's in the religion, whether it's outside of the religion. It's not maybe for us to know right now, but we can't allow thousands, and I don't mean thousands, tens of thousands of people are pouring into our country, and many of them are no different than this guy yesterday who created this horrible act.
Meanwhile, in a video posted to Facebook, Mateen's father condemned his son's actions, but also said, quote, God himself will punish those involved in homosexuality. Now joining us to discuss this from Yorktown, Virginia is Junaid Ahmad. He's a professor at the University of Lahore, director for the Center of Global Dialogue, and Secretary General for the International Movement for a Just World. Thanks so much for joining us.
So wonderful to be with you.
We know you're just on a brief visit to the U.S. from Pakistan, but let's get your response to the attacks. And we've already heard the comments of Donald Trump doubling down on his ban on all Muslims from entering this country. He blamed Islam for the actions of the shooter.
Right, and of course that was kind of expected. You know, I think for Donald Trump, he will blame anything, any hurricane, El Nino, whatever, on Islam and Muslims or Mexicans for that matter. So that was quite expected. The shooting itself was an incredible tragedy and an atrocity. And I think that it's incredibly important to take the religion out of the picture, and point to kind of the general homophobia that still does exist within the United States as well, large sections of the population here, and whether or not it manifests itself in such violent shootings, there's no doubt that sentiment of homophobia is you don't have to go to the country of origin of this shooter, Afghanistan, to find it. It's very present here in the U.S. As well. And I think that the second point is that it is more of a reflection of the type of pathology of violence that has, and the gun culture specifically, that has permeated the United States over the past few years, which is now, just too massive to ignore and to hide. And I think that culture of violence, which has, of course, pervaded both within the U.S. and has been exported abroad through wars, invasions, drones, and so on, is also part of the picture when we're looking at why something like this is taking place. This is, of course, the level of killings in this shooting is greater than previous ones, but these things are almost becoming routine. So there are some hard questions that need to be asked about what type of profound social alienation that's taking place in this country that is making individuals undertake these horrific outbursts of violence in schools and in settings like this. And that's, besides the clear homophobia that was expressed in this act as well.
And so, you mentioned how Donald Trump's reaction is more or less like what anyone could have predicted, as soon as it happened. But, this morning, in an interview with NBC's Today, Politico is reporting that Hillary Clinton is breaking from Obama and calling the attack radical Islamism. And this is significant, of course, because she is the presumptive Democratic nominee. What does this say about the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton and the favorite to win the White House right now, that she is breaking with President Obama and saying, and again, blaming Islam for this act?
Well, it kind of depresses all of us that already knew better that Hillary is, she's a war hawk herself, calling herself a Democrat and trying to distinguish herself from nasty Donald Trump, but really herself being complicit in the way empire has operated in its wars and interventions over the past few decades, really. This is a good example of how there's not much difference when it comes to dealing with these issues internationally and domestically. That is, to once again demonize an entire faith, an entire culture, an entire people, Muslims in this case, as being responsible for this act that took place. And I think that Trump's rhetoric is the most blatant and kind of flagrant on these types of matters, but the type of liberal and not so liberal Islamophobia that takes place with terms like Islamic terrorism thrown around without any meaning to them, and any reflection upon actually what does this actually mean, and how we are collectively holding accountable people of over 1 billion people for the acts of these few individuals. There's no critical reflection on that, even from many Democrats, including Hillary Clinton. So it's just frightening, but also not too surprising for many of us who always considered Hillary also a war hawk when it came to these types of issues.
And so the viewers of The Real News might be familiar with the forces that the U.S. has allied itself in the Islamic world, but can you just touch upon that? Because in the media we hear that we're involved in the Middle East to spread democracy, to spread human rights, the rule of law. But who exactly have we allied ourselves with in the Middle East, and sort of what ideologies have we fostered? And talk a little bit about that. How this ideology has it didn't sort of come out of nowhere.
That's right. And again, I mean, it's important to somewhat separate the two issues. Like I said, the specific act that took place in Orlando needs to be analyzed in the context of what's been going on in the U.S. over the past few years in terms of the culture of gun violence that has been promoted and facilitated, and that has led to so many of these incidences taking place left and right. And of course, the issue of general homophobia. With regard to the Muslim world, I mean, it's been very clear this type of fundamentalist violence that has been unleashed in parts of the Muslim world and then often exported to the West as well, comes from a very specific historical political moment in which the United States decided to support many of these so-called moderate Arab regimes in their support for reactionary fundamentalist Islam as a counterweight to secular nationalism and other types of movements that were very popular in the Muslim world at one time. And so not only was political Islam in some manifestations supported, but the most violent, militant, and fundamentalist forms of it were from right back from the 1980s in the war against the Soviets in Afghanistan till the present day. There's ISIS, and all of these groups have their origins straight to Saudi Arabia, and of course that's all being done with the tacit support of the U.S. And of course later on then they throw their arms up in the air and say that, oh, we don't know where the heck these guys came from, and now we have to deal with them, when they were the products of their either directly their policies or indirectly in the first place. So this is the history of kind of where not only this fundamentalist thought, but the practice comes from. While all of the kind of dominant religious traditions may have some homophobia in them in terms of their orthodox interpretations or so on, the fact that those have been converted in the Muslim world into a very repugnant, reactionary, fundamentalist, and violent form of religion is completely attributable to the policies that the U.S. and its quote-unquote moderate Arab regime allies like Saudi Arabia have been undertaking over the past few decades.
Well, we want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for joining us at the Real News Network.